Of course. Here's section 1 of your 2,000-word infidelity story script, minimum 500 words, written in a direct, immersive first-person narrative, with no scene descriptions and no repeated or unnecessary content. Just clean, emotionally charged prose. When I married Robert, I knew there would be adjustments. He was older, set in his ways, quiet. We had stability, routine, the kind of life that looks good on paper. But what the world doesn't see is what happens in the quiet. The way silence can stretch into something sharp. The way loneliness can creep in even when you're not technically alone. David was always just a name at first, someone Robert mentioned in passing. He's at school, or he won't be back until the holidays. I met him briefly once before the wedding. Polite, reserved. A boy still soft around the edges. So when Robert told me David would be staying with us for the summer, I didn't think twice. I was even looking forward to the company. The house could be so still, and Robert, always preoccupied, never filled the space. But when David walked through the door that first afternoon, he wasn't the boy I remembered. He had grown taller, leaner, with a quiet confidence that filled the room.
His voice had dropped.
His gaze held longer than I expected. He gave me a quick hug, one arm around my waist, brief and polite. Still, something lingered. Maybe it was the faint trace of cologne, or maybe it was just how different he seemed, how aware I was, suddenly, of myself standing there in the kitchen, hands damp from rinsing herbs, apron tied too tight. We made small talk over dinner. Robert didn't say much. He rarely did. I carried the conversation, and David matched me beat for beat. He was bright, funny, relaxed. I watched him laugh at something I said, and a strange warmth bloomed in my chest. Not attraction, not yet. Just a flicker of recognition. Someone seeing me, actually seeing me. The first moment came a few nights later. I'd made dessert, tiramisu from scratch. Robert passed as usual. David hovered at the kitchen island, watching me layer the cream and espresso-soaked biscuits. I scooped a spoonful and held it out. "Want a taste?" I asked. He leaned in, mouth closing over the spoon, and for a second, our eyes met. His lips wrapped around the metal. He pulled back slowly, surprised. "Wow," he said. "That's amazing." But it wasn't the words. It was the pause before them, the way he looked at me like he wasn't just tasting dessert. I told myself I imagined it. He started joining me in the kitchen more often. I caught him watching me as I moved. Once, he brushed past me to grab something, his hand grazing the small of my back. Too casual to be inappropriate. Too deliberate to ignore. At night, I found myself thinking about his laugh, the way he always listened without distraction, unlike his father. I started paying more attention to what I wore at home. Not on purpose, not really. But I knew when he'd be around, and I noticed when his eyes lingered just a second too long. I didn't do anything about it. Not then. I just kept offering him small tastes. And every time, he seemed more surprised. Of course. Here's section 2 of your story, continuing seamlessly from section 1, keeping the writing sharp, emotionally driven, and to the point, with no repetition or filler. Minimum 500 words. We started talking more. It wasn't intentional, just small things at first, what he was studying, how he felt about being home. He said he liked the quiet, but I could tell he was restless. He didn't have many friends around anymore, and Robert, as usual, was either out or distracted, treating David more like a guest than his own son. One evening, David and I sat at the table long after dinner. He asked if I was happy, not in those words, but close enough. I gave a practiced smile and said, "Of course." He tilted his head slightly, that same way he did when he didn't believe something but didn't want to push. I looked away and asked about his classes. He didn't push. After that, our conversations shifted. Less surface, more real. He told me things he hadn't told Robert, about changing his major, about feeling like a stranger when he came home. I listened because I knew that feeling too well. There's something isolating about living in a house with someone who forgets you're a person and not just part of the furniture. One night, I was folding laundry in the living room. He walked in, sat down, and helped me without asking. We didn't talk much, but the silence felt different, more comfortable. When our hands brushed, Neither of us pulled away right away. He glanced at me, his eyes softer than they should have been. It wasn't awkward. That was the strangest part. It felt inevitable. I told myself boundaries mattered. I told myself I was imagining everything. But then he started noticing little things. My favorite tea, the book I left open on the table, the song I hummed while cooking. He noticed in a way Robert never did. He remembered things I didn't realize I'd even said. I started to anticipate him. His footsteps in the morning.
His voice in the hallway.
I'd pretend to be busy when he entered a room just to control my expression. I could feel my heart tighten when I heard him speak to me, when I caught his scent walking past. I felt ridiculous, but I didn't stop it. One afternoon, I was bent down organizing the pantry, and he walked up behind me and handed me a jar without me asking. I turned too quickly, almost bumping into him. We were too close. I looked up. He didn't move. There was a beat where everything paused. Then he smiled, soft and almost shy, and stepped back. Nothing happened. But everything happened. I began dreaming about him. Not just physical things, though those dreams came too, but dreams where we talked, laughed, touched each other like we belonged together. I woke up flushed and ashamed. I told myself to stop. But each day, it got harder to pretend the line hadn't already blurred. I hadn't touched him, not really. But emotionally, I'd crossed something. And I wasn't sure I wanted to go back. Here is section 3 of your story, continuing directly from the previous parts. It maintains the same sharp, emotionally direct tone, avoids repetition, and delivers the crucial turning point with clarity and tension, minimum 500 words. Robert had a business trip coming up 3 days away. I didn't react when he told me. I nodded, asked when his flight was, helped him pack without question. My mind was quiet, but inside, I felt the shift before it happened. David didn't say much either, but I caught him looking at me differently that morning, like he knew too. The first day was normal. I kept busy, cleaned the kitchen twice, reorganized drawers that didn't need it. When David came downstairs, he noticed. "You always this restless when he's gone?" he asked. I forced a laugh and said, "Just trying to keep the house from falling apart." He leaned against the doorway and watched me. He didn't say anything else, and neither did I. That night, I poured a glass of wine. One turned into 2. I offered him one. He hesitated, then took it. We sat on opposite ends of the couch, talking about everything and nothing. The wine loosened things that had already been unraveling for weeks. I asked him how he really felt coming back here. He said it was strange, like stepping into someone else's story. I asked if he felt like he belonged. He looked at me and said, "I do when it's just you." It landed too hard. Too honest. I didn't answer. He got up to leave, but then stopped. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Do you ever feel like you're just disappearing here?" I met his eyes. I didn't nod. I didn't speak. But something in my expression must have answered for me. He sat back down closer this time. The space between us held everything unspoken. My breathing was shallow. I felt my heartbeat in places I hadn't in years. He reached for my hand, slowly, like he was giving me time to stop him. I didn't. His thumb brushed across my knuckles, and I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. I should have pulled away. I didn't. When he leaned in, it wasn't sudden. It felt like something we'd both been walking toward for weeks. His lips hovered near mine, giving me one last chance. I closed the distance. The kiss was soft at first, uncertain. Then it deepened, and I felt myself unravel. It wasn't reckless. It was desperate, restrained only by how much we both knew we shouldn't be doing it. We didn't speak. We didn't explain. We moved like we were following something already decided. I led him upstairs. My hands were shaking, but I didn't stop. His touched me like I was something he'd been imagining, like he couldn't believe I was real. I felt worshipped.
Alive. Guilty.
Hungry. All at once. After, he didn't say anything. He looked at me like he didn't know what came next. I looked back, pretending I did. He brushed his fingers down my arm. "Why me?" he asked, quiet. I wanted to say I didn't know. But I did. He was the only one who'd made me feel anything real in a long time. And I had offered him a taste. He just finally took it. Here is section 4, concluding the story with clarity, emotional weight, and a strong finish. The tone remained sharp, reflective, and purposeful. No repetition, no filler, minimum 500 words. The morning after felt quieter than usual. Not just the house, me. I got out of bed slowly, every movement deliberate. David wasn't in the kitchen.
His door was closed.
I stood there with my coffee, staring at nothing, wondering if it had really happened. My body said yes. My mind was trying to rewrite it. I told myself it had been a moment, just one. But it wasn't. It was a choice. One I had made long before it happened, slowly, piece by piece. I didn't regret it. That was the problem. Later, I passed him in the hallway. He muttered a soft morning, without meeting my eyes. I nodded. That was it. All that heat, all that emotion, and now we were strangers again, but with history. Robert came home that evening. He kissed me on the cheek like always. Routine. Predictable. He asked how everything went. I said fine. He didn't notice anything off. I don't think he ever would. That was always the danger with him. How easy it was to disappear in plain sight. At dinner, David barely spoke. I didn't look at him. Robert talked about his meetings. I nodded, smiled at the right moments, played the part. Inside, I was trying to quiet the noise. Afterwards, I stood alone at the sink. David came in, set his plate down gently beside me. Thanks, he said. Just that. No tone, no look, like erasing everything between us was the only option. I wanted to ask him if he hated me. I wanted to ask if he felt used. But the truth is, I didn't use him.
And he didn't use me.
We found something neither of us were supposed to touch, and we touched it anyway. That night, I lay beside Robert, listening to him breathe. I kept wondering how one part of your life can stay still while another spirals without making a sound. I didn't cry. I didn't confess. I stared at the ceiling and tried to feel something other than panic. The next morning, David left early. No goodbye. No note.
Just gone.
I stood in the doorway of his empty room and felt something collapse quietly in my chest. I didn't even know what I wanted. For him to stay? For it to have meant more? Or for it to disappear entirely? Robert asked if I was okay. I said I was tired. He believed me. He always did. Days passed. I waited for guilt to settle in. It came, but not the way I expected. It didn't crush me. It lived under my skin, quiet and constant, like a hum I could never shut off. Sometimes, I remember the way David looked at me right after. Like he saw something I forgot was there. Sometimes, I wonder if I imagine that look altogether. I don't know if he'll come back. I don't know what I'd do if he did. But I offered him a taste. And in that one moment, when everything was wrong, it was also the only thing that ever felt completely, painfully right.